Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for April 1st of 2024. Something I do want to note before I start this video is that this is not an April Fool's prank. Everything that I am saying in this forecast is 100% serious. I would not prank you guys, especially with something of this magnitude. As you can see, we do have a moderate risk currently issued for central Oklahoma into portions of northern Texas there, with a very large enhanced risk that spans all the way from Ohio, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, northern Kentucky, the majority of Missouri, north and northwestern Arkansas, into northern Texas, and southeastern Kansas there, as well as a marginal threat that extends all the way from the Texas Panhandle, southern Texas, all the way to northern North Carolina and the majority of Virginia. So we have a very large area for the potential of severe thunderstorms and potentially very significant severe thunderstorms as well. Our risks for today do include a 10% tornado risk with the potential for some strong tornadoes across this region. We could definitely see the potential for some strong tornadoes in this region as indicated by models, and we could see the potential for tornadoes extend all the way from West Virginia across central Texas. So again, a very large area for the potential of tornadoes. For our damaging wind risk, we do have a 30% with the hatched area, indicating that we may be able to see the potential of some destructive wind gusts greater than 50 knots to potentially around 60 to 70 miles per hour, quite destructive wind gusts. And then for our hail risk, which is the main driver for this moderate risk, we do have a 45% for the potential of extremely large hail across this region. We do have a 30% that does extend into central Illinois. So we could definitely see the potential of some extremely large hail today. For tomorrow, we do have an enhanced risk for central Kentucky, across central Tennessee into northern Alabama and northern Mississippi. And the threats for tomorrow do include a 10% tornado risk that isn't currently hatched. However, this will likely see some massive changes. I will likely see the greatest risk for tornadoes probably shift around this area. Probably not as big as what that circle indicated, but probably around this area. But we could definitely see the potential for strong tornadoes tomorrow as well. For our damaging wind risk, we do have a 30%, and for our hail risk, we do have a 15% hail risk. And then for day 3 outlook, this is going to be as the cold front continue to progresses eastward and crosses over the Appalachian Mountains. We could see the potential for some severe thunderstorms for central Florida and the eastern seaboard, extending from North Carolina into southern New Jersey. And then for day 4 to day 8 outlook, we currently don't have anything issued, but it does indicate the potential for upcoming severe thunderstorms. Taking a look at our excessive rainfall forecast for today, we do have a slight risk that extends across West Virginia into the majority of Missouri, where we could be watching for the potential of some scattered flash flooding. However, I won't really be on the lookout for flash flooding for today. For tomorrow, we do have a slight risk that extends across Pennsylvania, West Virginia, southern Ohio, eastern Kentucky into eastern Tennessee there, where we could see the potential for some scattered flash flooding. And then for day 3 outlook, we do have a marginal threat for the potential of some isolated flash flooding for some of the New England region there, for Massachusetts, Rhode Island, southern Connecticut, the New York City region, and northern New Jersey. And then for winter weather outlooks for today, we may be able to see the potential for some elevated heavy snowfall across elevated portions of the Rockies, and the potential for some heavy snowfall for southern South Dakota and northern Nebraska there. Then for tomorrow, we may be able to see the potential for some heavy snowfall for the New England corridor and the Midwest regions, including mainly northern Michigan there. And then for day 3 outlook, we are expected to see the potential for very heavy snowfall for a lot of the New England corridor, but we still may be able to see some back towards the Midwest, mainly across the Michigan regions, as well as some elevated regions of the Rockies. Taking a look at our weather models, starting off with our 5 terminal bars in our surface analysis, and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms. As of right now, as far as our upper level air pattern, we are watching a pretty significant and pretty powerful shortwave trough that is advecting out of a pretty deep upper level low across the southwestern U.S. And this shortwave will advect into the region, and it will be quite powerful. We are expected to see mid-level flow as a result, potentially get upwards of 80 to maybe 100 miles per hour across this region at 500 millibars. And then across the warm frontal region, we may be able to see a mid-level flow that may be able to reach speeds of potentially 80 to 60 miles per hour across the warm frontal zone across the north there. So we are definitely expected to see a quite remarkable amount of speed here, and this should definitely support the potential for some significant severe thunderstorms with how powerful this is. And then as far as our surface observations, as of right now, we are expected to see a low pressure system, the surface low, that is going to develop between this cold front and this dry line here. We do have a surface low up towards Kansas there. However, we also do have a dry line that is extending down across western Oklahoma and western Texas. This will fire off the risk for severe thunderstorms after we get a massive push in our low levels out from the west, and the dry line will push into the region of concern and fire off some messy or discrete supercells across this region. And then we do have the warm front that is extended across the northern region there, across Missouri to Illinois and Indiana, and that will likely support more of a messy to potentially more linear configuration for our storms, but still exhibit the potential of some destructive wind gusts, the potential for massive hail, and the potential for strong tornadoes. Taking a look at our 850 millibars in our low-level jet and how that's going to affect our risk for tornadoes across this region. Previous model runs a couple of days ago were indicating a much more mid-low-level jet. However, most recent model runs have been indicating a quite significant uptick in the potential for tornadoes with a quite powerful low-level jet. Our low-level jet at 850 millibars is expected to increase to potentially around 50 miles per hour and 40 miles per hour in the warm sector, which will support quite a lot of speed shear, but also directional shear across this region. I'm still kind of uncertain as far as our shear. However, a lot of composite models in the low-level jet has had a massive uptick in the potential for tornadoes with how our low-level jet has really come together in the last couple model runs. Taking a look at our upper-level jet and how that's going to affect our speed shear. We're going to be looking for two things: our speed shear, which is how strong our upper level jet streak there is, and the spreading of our isobars for defluence, because what that will do is that will kind of create a void in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and because the atmosphere is a gas and it will like to retrieve equilibrium any way it can, at our 500 millibars in our low levels, air will rise up to fill that void, and that will lead to very large amounts of widespread and wide-scale synoptic lift. However, as far as our isobar spreading, our wind vector spreading, it doesn't really look like we're going to see too much spreading of our wind vectors. We may be able to see some subtle spreading. However, our wind vectors have been exhibiting potentially maybe a little bit of spread, so that may help with the potential for storms across this region. However, as far as our upper level jet streak, we are definitely seeing some quite remarkable speed shear with 200 millibars flow, upwards of 140, 150 knots, which again will definitely lead to some insane amount of speed shear across this region and a pretty big hail risk. Taking a look at our speed shear, and then we'll take a look at our directional shear. We're going to be taking a look at our hail risk across this region. We are expected to see some, again, quite remarkable speed shear. Ahead of storms, we may be able to see bulk shear values at 0 to 6 kilometer that may be able to reach upwards of 60 knots. And then backing storms, we may be able to see speed shear values or bulk shear values that may be able to reach upwards of 110, 113 knots of bulk shear at 0 to 6 kilometers. And across the warm frontal zone as well, where we may be able to see the potential for some massive hail, we are seeing bulk shear values upwards of 80 to potentially 70 to 60 knots of speed shear across this region, and that will definitely support a quite remarkable risk for hail across this region. Taking a look at our storm relative felicity and our directional shear across this region and how that's going to affect the potential for tornadoes. Again, as I was mentioning previously, we were having some issues with directional shear and the potential for tornadoes. However, because of how strong our low-level jet is expected to get later in the night, that will definitely support the potential for some significant tornadoes, as by the time our low-level jet increases and we see some pretty powerful directional shear upwards of 300 meters squared a second squared along the warm frontal zone, and then potentially upwards of 400 and 300, maybe even reaching 500 meters squared a second squared across southern Oklahoma and northern Texas across the dry line zone. Our storms will likely be across this region by the time our low level jet increases. So are quite decent and quite sufficient instability will overlap with our quite sufficient storm relative felicity to support the potential for significant tornadoes across this region. We shouldn't really see a 15% tornado risk. I definitely think a 15% tornado risk is likely out of the question, but we could still see the potential for some significant tornadoes. Taking a look at our composite reflectivity, I'm going to be going over the timing for our storms as well as some general radar analysis for what the simulated reflectivity is currently indicating. As of right now, as I am recording this, I am noticing that we do have some rain showers that may be associated with that a little bit of defluence, and they may also be firing off of the dry line. That may also be firing off the warm front. I'm honestly not really too sure how that will affect the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. However, we may have to watch that because that may lead to overall less instability in the environment and more convective inhibition and less surface instability to support surface-based storms with the introduction of rain-cooled air. So we will have to watch that. But honestly, I'm not really too sure how that will affect the risk for severe thunderstorms. However, our severe thunderstorm risk definitely does seem like it will hold. Our storms are probably going to fire pretty early, around 3 to 4 p.m. Across the Oklahoma Kansas border, with maybe a cluster of some of a supercell there that is going to fire, and then our storms, our main event, are going to begin firing across Kansas and southern Oklahoma around 5 p.m. And then we're going to see continued massive upscale growth around 7 p.m. And we're going to see quite a lot of widespread hail, as indicated by our radar here. You can see a lot of our simulated reflectivity is indicating very widespread 70 and 60 dBz, indicating some massive hail across this region. Across Oklahoma, it does look like we may have potentially more of an isolated mode, but also more of a messy mode. But I think our storms will likely quickly organize into more of an MCS, a line of storms that are going to exhibit more of a potential of damaging wind gusts and some massive hail, with maybe the potential for some embedded strong tornadoes. And then across Missouri, we're going to see probably storms take on more of a QLCS mode almost immediately, either a cluster or QLCS mode around 7 to 6 p.m. So our storms are definitely going to be pretty widespread and pretty powerful. And then our storms are going to likely die off across the Arkansas region in southern Missouri, beginning around 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. And we may be able to see continued QLCS that may continue into southern portions of Illinois, Indiana, and northern Kentucky into the early morning of tomorrow. Taking a look at our dew points, we're going to be getting into the environment that our storms are expected to be in with our instability and how that's going to fuel our risk for severe thunderstorms. But taking a look at our dew points, you can see that dry line pretty prominently there across western Oklahoma. And then you can also see our warm front which does extend across northern Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. And you can see that we do have a pretty big amount of moisture across this region, with dew point values that may be able to range upwards of the mid 60s for the entire warm sector, potentially approaching the low 70s for portions of eastern Texas, northeastern Texas, and southern Oklahoma there. So we are definitely expected to see quite a lot of instability come out of this with some fairly decent moisture. Taking a look at our temperatures and how that's going to affect our instability, we are expected to see some pretty warm temperatures across this region. Across the warm sector, we may be able to see temperatures that may be able to range anywhere from 70 to 80 degrees across this region, which is definitely not out of the question. Will definitely support some pretty decent instability across this region. I definitely don't think that Cape values in the 2000s are out of the question because of this. We definitely have some pretty strong, pretty juicy environment for instability across this region. Taking a look at our lapse rates and how that's going to affect our risk for hail as well as the potential for storms across this region, we are expected to see some pretty decent lapse rates across this region. Across the Oklahoma region for the moderate risk, we may be able to see lapse rates that may be able to reach the 7s to the 8s to potentially the low 9s across southern Oklahoma and northern Texas, across the Red River there. What that will do is it will massively aid with our hail risk, as will expand the optimal layer for hail development and make it much colder the higher up you go in the atmosphere, which will wildly help with the potential for hails. And especially with the amount of species that we have across this region, that will definitely help with the potential for massive hail across this region. And then across Missouri, where we could still see the potential for massive hail, we are seeing lapse rate values that may be able to get upwards of the 7s to 6s, which isn't as strong as Oklahoma, but still supportive of the potential for some massive hail. And then as far as our instability with our lapse rates, we are definitely expected to see massive aid in instability. We could definitely see quite a lot of instability come from our very strong lapse rates. Taking a look at our 700 millibar temperatures and our convective inhibition and how that's going to affect our instability and the potential for storms across this region, starting off, you can tell that we are expected to have an insane amount of warm air advection out of the southwest there, which will lead to a very large amount of convective inhibition across the warm sector. What this will do is will allow for a lot of instability building and much greater instability values by the time that cap breaks, and surface heating allows for that cap to break. And it will also keep any messy convection in the warm sector from developing. So what we see as far as our storms will likely be the only thing from our storms. We shouldn't really see any storms fire off in the warm sector off of warm air advection as a result of our cap being so strong. And what this will do is by the time this cap breaks, it will explode because of how strong it is and how much instability is expected to build underneath it. Taking a look at our most unstable cape, finally culminating everything together to take a look at how much instability we are expected to have across this region. We are expected to see a ton of instability as a result of how strong our parameters are. We are expected to see cape values that may be able to range anywhere from the upper 2000s, the mid 2000s, to potentially approaching the 3000s across our dry line and warm front. This will definitely be able to fuel the potential for massive hail, some pretty strong updrafts, and the potential for some strong tornadoes, as well as the potential for some destructive wind gusts across this region. Again, our most unstable cape is going to be really strong and very supportive of the potential of significant storms. Taking a look at our surface-based cape, there's not really much for me to say about this, but the majority of our most unstable cape does look like it is expected to translate down to our surface as well, which will support the potential for surface-based storms and the potential for surface-based rotation and tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability and how that's going to help with our tornado risk across this region, as well as our general risk for severe thunderstorms. We are expected to see quite a lot of 0 to 3 kilometer instability across this region, not only along the dry line, but also along the warm front as well. Sorry that it's kind of laggy because our updraft helicity tracks are lagging my computer for some reason. But as a result of this strong 0 to 3 kilometer instability, and the shear that we are expected to see across this region, we should definitely see that aid drastically with the potential of significant tornadoes across this region, as well as aid with our potential for hail, and generally aid with our potential for severe thunderstorms across this region, generally speaking. And then across our warm front, I am kind of concerned for the potential of tornadoes there, because we are expected to see a lot of warm air advection out of the south at the surface, and then on the northern end of that warm front, it's immediately going to change out of the west here, and that will allow for a lot of surface vorticity along that warm front. And with the amount of 0 to 3 kilometer instability that we are seeing across that warm front, that will definitely allow for a very big hotspot for our cheat code and the potential for tornadoes across this region. So again, this entire area definitely needs to be watched for the potential of significant tornadoes. However, I think that this warm front may need to be watched more than anything. But then also our Oklahoma risk is also looking quite potent. But I will definitely have a very close eye on that warm front. Taking a look at our mesoanalysis page, we're going to be starting off with our composite models, and we're going to be taking a look at the potential for hail across this region. We're going to start off with our significant hail parameter, and you can tell that our models are really indicating that we are going to see the potential for significant hail across this region. As you can see, a very pretty big three region across southern Oklahoma into northern Texas there. And then as for our SARS hail size, you can tell that it is just absolutely going crazy, as it is indicating upwards of 4 inches to 3 inches across this region. And then for our large hail parameter, you can tell it is really up there with composite indices upwards of 32 across northern Texas. And this will likely increase and likely broaden to fit the moderate threat area as storms develop. Taking a look at our energy helicity index values and how that is indicating the potential for tornadoes across this region, you can tell just by looking at them that we definitely have the potential for significant tornadoes. You can see very strong energy helicity index values that are ranging anywhere from 2 to potentially 5 and 6, closer to southern Oklahoma and northern Texas. This is another area that I'm definitely going to be watching pretty closely, because this area of enhanced energy helicity index values compared to the rest of the environment has been trending since a couple days ago. So again, I will definitely be watching the southern area there, as well as that warm front, for the potential of significant tornadoes. But regardless, we could still see the potential of significant tornadoes indicated by our energy helicity index values. Taking a look at our SIGTOR parameter, I take a look at this anytime we have the potential for significant tornadoes, and you can tell it is really going crazy. It is really cranking, and it is definitely indicating the potential for significant tornadoes across this region. Again, we are seeing SIGTOR values that may be able to get upwards of 3 to potentially an isolated 4 somewhere, but mainly around the 3s and 2s, which will definitely support the potential of a significant tornado, potentially a couple of significant tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our wind gust models and how that's going to indicate the potential for some widespread damaging wind gusts and potentially some significant damaging wind gusts along the dry line with those storms that are going to fire across Oklahoma. You can tell that models are indicating some pretty significant wind gusts that may be able to reach upwards of 60 to potentially 65, 68 miles per hour across Oklahoma. And then across the warm front, we may be able to see damaging wind gusts that may be able to reach upwards of 50 to 60 miles per hour as well. And then that's going to continue later into the afternoon with some storms that may be able to exhibit the potential of damaging wind gusts that still may be able to reach upwards of 50 to potentially 60 miles per hour across this region. So we could definitely see the potential for some destructive wind gusts with some of these storms. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the social for Project Gladiator and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas I covered for today, please stay weather alert for the time being. If you notice anything might have been wrong in this forecast or like to make a suggestion or ask a question, please leave a comment. 3 other channels I highly suggest you check out are JaxonWX. He will be storm chasing, and I will be partnering him on this live stream that I do later today, as well as One Nation Weather. He makes really good forecasts for the entire US that are much more digestible than mine. I do mainly in-depth forecasts, and then Weather Watcher does forecasts for Europe and the US if you are interested in that, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys on the live streams.